It started in a small town surrounded by quiet hills and narrow streets, where almost everyone knew each other. In one corner of that town lived a young girl who often spent her evenings sitting near her window, listening to the faint sounds of music drifting from a neighbor's radio. She didn't know much about musical instruments, but the sound of a piano always touched something deep inside her. Each note felt like it was talking to her, like a story without words. At school, she wasn't one of the popular students. She was the quiet kind, the one who listened more than she spoke. Most people barely noticed her, and those who did often thought she was too shy to try anything new. But what no one knew was that she carried a little dream inside her heart. She wanted to play the piano. Not for fame or attention, but because music made her feel alive in a way nothing else could. One day, the school announced that the music club would be taking new members. It was a small event, but for her, it felt like an open door she'd been waiting for. The club had a few instruments, some guitars, a few drums, and one old piano that sat in the corner of the music room. When she heard about it, her heart skipped a beat. That was her chance. When she told her classmates she wanted to join the music club and learn the piano, they looked at her as if she had said something ridiculous. One of the boys laughed and said, "You? The piano? You've never even touched one." Others giggled, shaking their heads. Even her friends gave her that look, the one that said, "Don't embarrass yourself," but she didn't say anything back. She just smiled softly and walked away. The truth was, she had never played a piano in her life. She didn't even know how to read music notes. Still, something inside her told her to try. The next day, she went to see the music teacher, a middle-aged man with glasses who always looked busy. When she told him she wanted to learn piano, he hesitated. "Do you have any experience?" he asked. She shook her head. He sighed, clearly not expecting much. "It's not an easy instrument," he said. "Most students give up after a few days. It takes time, patience, and a lot of practice." She nodded, her eyes steady. "I understand," she said. "I just want to try." He looked at her for a moment, perhaps seeing something sincere in her expression, and finally agreed to let her join. But deep down, even he didn't think she would last long. The first time she sat at the piano, her hands trembled slightly. The keys looked like a puzzle, black and white lines stretching endlessly. She pressed one key, and the sound that came out echoed softly in the empty room. Then she pressed another and another. The melody didn't make sense, but she smiled anyway. For the first time, she wasn't just listening to music, she was creating it. After school, while others went home to relax or hang out with friends, she stayed back to practice. The room was usually empty except for her and the piano. She didn't mind the loneliness. Every day she learned something new. How to position her fingers, how to count the beats, how to listen closely to each note. At first she made plenty of mistakes. Her fingers slipped, her timing was off, and sometimes the sound was completely wrong. But she never gave up. Days turned into weeks, and slowly she began to improve. But her progress didn't go unnoticed. One afternoon, as she practiced, a few classmates peeked through the door and started whispering and laughing. One of them called out, "You sound like a broken toy." She froze for a moment, embarrassed, but she didn't turn around. Instead, she took a deep breath and kept playing. The laughter eventually faded as they left, but the words stayed with her. That night, when she came home, her mother noticed she was quiet. Over dinner, she asked if something was wrong. The girl just smiled and said, "Nothing, I'm fine." But deep inside, she wondered if maybe everyone was right. Maybe she wasn't good enough. Maybe she should stop trying. Later, she sat by the window again, staring at the stars. She could almost hear the piano in her head, the way the keys felt under her fingers, the sound that came alive when she played. She closed her eyes and decided that no matter what anyone said, she wouldn't stop. She wasn't doing this to impress anyone. She was doing it because it made her happy. From then on, she practiced harder than ever. She stayed longer after school, even when the music teacher had already left. Sometimes the janitor would have to remind her it was time to go home. When she couldn't use the piano, she drew a keyboard on a sheet of paper at home. She would sit with it on her lap, pretending to play, memorizing finger placements and counting rhythms. Her little brother used to laugh and say, "How can you play music on paper?" She'd just smile and answer, "You'll see." Her dedication slowly started to show. Her touch on the keys became smoother, her timing better. She learned to read simple sheet music, though it wasn't easy. She'd spend hours going over the same few lines again and again until it sounded right. Her teacher began to notice. One day after class, he stopped her and said, "You've been practicing a lot, haven't you?" She nodded shyly. He smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. "Keep going," he said. "You have something special. Don't lose it." Those words gave her strength. But not everyone shared the same kindness. Some students still teased her, saying she was wasting time. A few girls even mocked her in the hallway, calling her the piano dreamer. At first, their laughter hurt, but she learned to let it go. She realized that people often laugh at what they don't understand. As months passed, her world began to revolve around the piano. She found peace in those black and white keys. Every note she played carried a piece of her heart. She started composing small tunes of her own. Nothing fancy, just simple melodies that reflected how she felt. When she was happy, they sounded light and gentle. When she was sad, the notes felt heavy and deep. Sometimes she wondered if anyone would ever hear her play and understand what it meant to her. But even if no one did, she told herself it was enough to keep going. Her parents couldn't afford to buy her a piano, but they supported her in their own way. Her father fixed an old stool from the garage so she could sit comfortably while practicing at school. Her mother sometimes packed her an extra sandwich, saying, "You'll need energy for all that music." Little things like that made her feel loved and understood. One rainy afternoon, as she was leaving school, she overheard two students talking near the entrance. "She's still trying to learn that piano," one of them said, chuckling. "It's been months and she still plays like a beginner." The other replied, "Yeah, she'll give up soon. No one like her can really make it." She walked past them quietly, pretending not to hear, but their words echoed in her mind as she walked home under the rain. Her shoes were soaked and her hands were freezing, but all she could think about was how much she wanted to prove them wrong, not with anger, but with music. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept hearing those words, so she got up, took her paper keyboard, and started practicing in silence. The rain outside tapped against the window, creating a soft rhythm. She matched her finger movements to that rhythm and imagined she was playing a real piano. She didn't stop until the first light of morning filled her room. By the time she returned to school, something inside her had changed. She was no longer just a shy girl trying to learn an instrument. She had found a purpose. Every mistake became a lesson, every failure a step forward. And even though people still whispered behind her back, she noticed something new. They were beginning to pay attention. Her sound was getting better. Her music teacher started including her in small practice sessions with other students. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. But what really mattered to her wasn't their attention. It was the quiet feeling she got every time her fingers touched the keys. The calm, the focus, the joy. It was like she and the piano spoke a language no one else could hear. She didn't know it yet, but all those lonely hours, all those nights with her paper keyboard, all those moments when people laughed at her, every bit of it was shaping her into something extraordinary. The same people who mocked her would one day sit in silence, listening to her play, wondering how the girl they once laughed at had turned into someone who could make the world stop with just a few notes. But that day was still ahead. For now she was just a girl, sitting by the piano after everyone had gone home, her fingers gently moving over the keys, her heart whispering, "Don't stop, not yet." Weeks passed, and the girl's life slowly started to revolve around the piano. Every free moment she got, she spent it near that old instrument. The music room had become her favorite place in the entire school. Sometimes she even forgot to eat lunch just to get a few more minutes to practice. The keys were no longer strange to her fingers. They had started to feel familiar, almost like old friends. The piano wasn't in perfect condition. A few keys were chipped, and one or two didn't make any sound at all. But she didn't mind. She believed that if she could make something beautiful out of that old piano, she could make something beautiful out of anything. Every afternoon after classes ended, she would stay behind while the hallways emptied. The sound of shoes and chatter faded until there was only the faint echo of her music filling the empty rooms. The janitor often peeked in and said, "You're still here?" She would smile and nod, promising to leave soon, but she always stayed a little longer. The teacher noticed her persistence but didn't say much. He had seen many students start with excitement and give up after a few weeks. Yet this girl was different. She didn't have fancy lessons or expensive instruments, but she had patience, real patience, the kind that came from love, not obligation. Still, the road wasn't easy. There were days when nothing sounded right. Her fingers wouldn't move fast enough, or she'd forget a note she had practiced the day before. Sometimes frustration made her eyes fill with tears. She would stop, press her palms against her forehead, and whisper to herself, "Why can't I get it right?" But then, she would remember the sound of those early songs she used to hear from the neighbor's radio, and somehow that memory gave her strength. She'd start again, slower this time, counting every beat carefully, trying until the melody came out the way she imagined it in her head. At home, she continued her silent practice. Her paper keyboard was now worn out from all the use. Some of the lines had faded and the paper edges were curling, but she still placed it on the table every night and practiced with it, moving her fingers as if it were real. Her mother sometimes watched from the doorway, smiling softly, though she didn't say anything. She knew her daughter wasn't just chasing a hobby, she was chasing a dream. Her father didn't understand much about music, but he admired her dedication. Once he told her, "You may not have a real piano at home, but you have something even stronger, your heart. That's what makes a real musician." She kept those words close to her heart. At school, however, not everyone was supportive. The same students who had laughed before continued to tease her. They would whisper things like, "There she goes again, pretending to be a musician," or "She should give up already." Sometimes they said it loud enough for her to hear. It hurt, but she had learned to smile through it. One afternoon while she was practicing, a few of them entered the music room. They leaned against the doorframe, watching her fingers move across the keys. One of them said, "Play something nice. Let's see what all this hard work is for." She hesitated but decided to keep playing. They laughed halfway through her song and left, still joking. After they were gone, she stopped, staring at the piano. For a moment she felt small again, like maybe they were right. The music teacher entered shortly after and saw her sitting there silently. He asked, "Everything okay?" She nodded, though her eyes looked distant. He didn't press further. Instead, he sat beside her and said, "Do you know what makes great musicians?" She shook her head. "It's not talent," he said softly. "It's endurance. People may not understand you now, but one day they'll listen." Those words gave her new energy. From that day, she practiced not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove herself right. Over time, her playing started to sound more confident. The notes flowed smoothly, and even the teacher was surprised by her progress. He began giving her slightly more difficult pieces, and although they frustrated her at first, she always found a way to learn them. One afternoon, as she practiced a new song, something magical happened. She played through the entire piece without making a single mistake. When the last note faded, she sat there breathless. For a few seconds, she didn't move. Then she smiled, the biggest, proudest smile she'd ever had. She had done it, but her journey was far from over. The next challenge came unexpectedly. The school announced that they would hold their annual talent show in 2 months. Every year, students performed. Some sang, others danced, some recited poems. This time, they were inviting musicians too. The thought of performing in front of everyone scared her. But deep down, she knew she wanted to do it. It was her chance to show not just what she had learned, but how much she had grown. When she told her classmates she planned to play the piano at the show, they looked at her as if she had lost her mind. One girl laughed and said, "You, on stage? You can barely play in tune." Another added, "Don't make a fool of yourself." She stayed quiet, as always, but her silence wasn't weakness anymore, it was strength. That night, she went home and told her mother about the talent show. Her mother looked worried. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked. "People can be harsh," the girl nodded. "I want to try," she said. "Even if I make mistakes, I'll know I tried." Her mother hugged her and whispered, "Then do it. But promise me you'll play from your heart, not for them." From that day, her preparation began. Every morning before school, she practiced finger exercises. Every afternoon, she stayed back to rehearse. She chose a piece that was both beautiful and challenging, a song that would test everything she had learned so far. There were times when she wanted to quit. Her hands ached, her back hurt, and her mind was tired. Sometimes she felt like she wasn't improving at all, but every time she thought about giving up, she remembered her first day at the piano, the laughter of her classmates, and the quiet determination that brought her this far. She couldn't stop now. One evening, as the sun was setting, she sat in the music room alone. The golden light poured in through the window, falling across the piano keys. She started to play her piece, and for the first time, She felt something shift inside her. The music wasn't just notes anymore, it was emotion. It was her story. Every struggle, every tear, every laugh, it all came out through her fingers. When the final note ended, she realized she was crying. Not from sadness, but from something deeper. She knew at that moment that no matter what happened at the talent show, she had already won something much greater, the courage to keep going. Her teacher, who had been standing quietly outside the room, heard her play and smiled. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, knowing she was finally finding her own voice. The following week, she began rehearsing in front of small groups. First her teacher, then a few classmates. Some were genuinely surprised at how far she had come. One of the same boys who used to laugh now said quietly, "You're actually good." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was enough. Still, she felt nervous whenever she imagined standing on stage in front of the entire school. She wasn't sure if her hands would stop shaking long enough to play properly, but she reminded herself that fear was part of being brave. One day, as she practiced late after school, the janitor came in to clean. He paused and listened for a while before saying, "You know, when you first started, it sounded like someone hitting random keys, but now it sounds like real music." She laughed, embarrassed but happy. Compliments were still new to her. As the days drew closer to the performance, she practiced every free moment she had. She stopped caring about what others said. The laughter, the whispers, they didn't matter anymore. What mattered was how she felt when she played. Finally, the week of the talent show arrived. The posters went up and everyone in school was talking about it. The excitement was in the air. Some students practiced dances in the hallways. Others rehearsed songs in the classrooms. And there she was, sitting quietly by the piano waiting for her turn. Her name was listed near the end of the show. Most people didn't pay much attention to it. They assumed she'd play a few wrong notes, maybe freeze on stage, and that would be it. But she knew something they didn't. She had put her soul into her music, and she was ready to let it speak for her. The night before the performance, she sat at home, too nervous to sleep. Her mother made her tea and sat beside her. "Are you scared?" she asked. The girl nodded. "A little," she admitted. Her mother smiled. "Good," she said. "That means you care. Just remember, you don't have to impress anyone. Just tell your story through the music." The girl looked down at her hands and whispered, "I'll do my best." As she went to bed that night, she closed her eyes and imagined herself sitting at the piano under the stage lights, her fingers moving gracefully over the keys. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of failing. She was ready. She had no idea that what would happen next would change everything. The way people saw her, the way she saw herself, and the way music would shape her life forever. The morning of the talent show arrived sooner than she expected. The school building buzzed with excitement. Students carried costumes, instruments, and props through the halls. The air smelled faintly of stage lights, fresh paint, and nervous energy. For most people, it was just another school event. But for her, it was the day she had been preparing for over months. When she woke up that morning, her stomach felt tight. She hadn't slept well. All night, her mind kept playing the same tune over and over, imagining every possible mistake she could make. What if her hands shook? What if she forgot a note? What if the audience laughed again? Her mother noticed the worry on her face while preparing breakfast. She placed a hand on her shoulder and said gently, "You've practiced more than anyone. Don't let fear take that away." Her father nodded, adding, "No matter what happens, we'll be proud." Those words gave her a small sense of calm, but her heart still raced. When she reached school, the auditorium was already decorated with lights and colorful banners. Rows of chairs faced the stage, and the sound crew tested the microphones. The piano stood in one corner of the stage, polished and ready. She stopped for a moment and stared at it, her fingers twitching slightly as if calling her to play. Her classmates were busy chatting and joking backstage. Some were confident, laughing loudly, while others paced nervously. A few looked at her and whispered among themselves. One of the boys smirked, saying, "Let's see how the piano dreamer does today." She heard it, but instead of feeling hurt, she took a slow breath and looked away. She had learned not to give those words power anymore. Her teacher approached her before the show began. He looked calm, yet there was pride in his eyes. "Remember," he said softly, "you're not playing for them. You're playing for yourself." She nodded, gripping the edges of her dress, trying to steady her hands. The program began with cheerful performances. students dancing to upbeat songs, some reciting poems, others performing short plays. The audience clapped, laughed, and cheered for their friends. The energy in the room was warm, but it made her even more nervous. Every time the MC called another name, she felt her heartbeat grow faster. Her turn was near the end, which made the waiting harder. Backstage, she sat quietly, her hands resting on her lap. She closed her eyes and pictured her first day at the piano. The empty music room, the chipped keys, the laughter outside the door. She remembered every mistake, every tear, every moment she wanted to give up. But then she also remembered the feeling she got the first time she played a song without error. The sound, the peace, the joy. That was what she wanted to hold on to. Finally, her name was called. The MC said it casually, not expecting much, and the audience clapped politely. As she walked onto the stage, the bright lights hit her face and she could barely see the crowd. Her knees felt weak. The auditorium suddenly seemed too big, too quiet. She could feel dozens of eyes watching her every move. She sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and placed her trembling fingers on the keys. For a brief second, she forgot everything, the notes, the rhythm, even how to breathe. Then she heard her mother's words in her mind. Play from your heart, not for them. She closed her eyes and began. The first few notes were soft and shaky, but then something shifted. Her fingers started to move naturally. Finding the familiar pattern she had practiced countless times, the sound began to flow, delicate yet strong. Each note carried emotion, her struggles, her sleepless nights, her quiet determination. The hall fell silent. The same students who used to mock her leaned forward, surprised. As the music grew, the audience could feel something deeper than just a song. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Her fingers moved with confidence now, faster and smoother than ever before. The melody rose and fell like waves, telling a story words could never express. Even the teacher standing backstage felt his chest tighten with pride. Halfway through the performance, she almost lost her place. For a split second, panic flashed in her eyes, but she took a quick breath, let her heart guide her, and continued. It was as if the piano itself was leading her forward. When she reached the final note, she let it linger, a soft, gentle sound that echoed in the hall before fading into silence. For a moment, there was nothing but stillness. She kept her eyes closed, afraid to look up. Then it happened. The audience erupted in applause. It started with a few claps, then grew louder, filling the entire room. People stood on their feet, cheering. Her teacher clapped the hardest, smiling proudly. Even the students who once laughed at her were speechless. She opened her eyes slowly, her heart racing, and saw the faces before her, smiling, surprised, touched. She didn't know what to do. She just sat there stunned. Then she stood up, gave a small bow, and smiled shyly. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from relief, from joy, from the realization that she had finally done it. When she walked off stage, her classmates gathered around. Some patted her shoulder. Others told her how beautiful the song was. One of the girls who had teased her earlier whispered, "You were amazing." She smiled and thanked them, not out of pride, but out of kindness. She didn't hold grudges. She didn't need to. Backstage, her teacher placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "You just proved that courage is louder than laughter." She nodded, her throat tight with emotion. That was the moment she knew everything she went through had been worth it. When the show ended, she went home feeling lighter than ever before. Her mother hugged her tightly, eyes full of pride. "I heard from the parents who were there," she said. "They couldn't stop talking about your performance." Her father smiled quietly, saying, "I told you, your heart is your music." That night, she couldn't sleep again, but this time it wasn't because of fear. She lay awake replaying the performance in her head, the sound of applause echoing softly in her ears. It felt unreal, like a dream. She had gone from being the girl everyone laughed at to the one who had moved them without saying a single word. In the days that followed, something changed at school. People started treating her differently. They greeted her in the hallways, asked her for advice about music, and invited her to join group activities. The same piano that once seemed lonely now attracted students who wanted to listen or learn. She helped them patiently, smiling as she showed them simple notes. Her teacher started giving her more advanced lessons, teaching her how to read complex pieces and play by ear. He often said, "You have something that can't be taught. You feel the music, and that's rare." Those words encouraged her to dream bigger. One afternoon, as she practiced, she noticed a group of younger students watching from the doorway. They didn't laugh or whisper, they just watched, curious and inspired. She remembered how it felt to be in their place, nervous and unsure, and smiled at them. "You want to try?" she asked. They nodded eagerly, and she moved aside, letting them touch the keys. Watching their excitement reminded her of her own beginning. Outside of school, her story started spreading. Parents talked about the girl who played so beautifully at the talent show. The local community center invited her to perform at their small cultural event. At first, she was terrified. It was one thing to play for her classmates, but a public audience was different. Still, she accepted. She wanted to keep growing, to keep challenging herself. At the community event, she played the same piece again, this time with even more emotion. People in the crowd listened quietly, many closing their eyes as the music filled the room. When she finished, the applause was louder than she ever imagined. A local music teacher approached her afterward and said, "You have real talent. You should keep pursuing this." That simple encouragement planted a new dream in her heart. Maybe one day she could study music seriously. Maybe she could perform on bigger stages, play in concerts, and inspire others like her. The thought scared her a little, but it also filled her with hope. Even though she had started to gain recognition, she never let it change her. She still practiced with the same old piano, still carried her paper keyboard in her school bag, and still stayed humble. When people asked how she got so good, she always said the same thing: "I just didn't stop trying." Her journey was far from over. The applause from the talent show became a memory she carried with her whenever she faced doubt. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she also knew she had found something no one could take away: the power of belief, the beauty of persistence, and the magic of music. One evening, while sitting by her window, she looked out at the stars just like she used to. The sound of the piano still echoed softly in her mind. She smiled, realizing how far she had come from the girl who once sat in that same spot, dreaming quietly, afraid to begin. Now she wasn't just dreaming, she was living it. And though she didn't know it yet, her story had only just begun. The world was about to open new doors for her, and the same people who once doubted her would soon be watching her journey with admiration and awe. Days after the talent show, the atmosphere around her changed completely. People who once ignored her now stopped to talk. Some congratulated her, some asked questions about music, and a few even wanted to learn the piano. She wasn't used to the attention. It felt strange but nice. For the first time, she felt seen, not for how she looked or where she came from, but for something she had worked hard to build. The school's music teacher began to take her training more seriously. He saw in her a spark that reminded him why he loved teaching in the first place. One afternoon, he handed her a stack of new sheet music. "These are more advanced pieces," he said. "You're ready for the next step." Her eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. The notes looked complicated and unfamiliar, but she felt a thrill run through her. It was a new challenge, and she was ready to take it. At home, she continued to practice the same way she always had, with patience and passion. The paper keyboard that once served as her practice tool still hung near her desk, a reminder of where she began. Every time she felt frustrated or tired, she looked at it and smiled. It reminded her that progress was built from small, humble steps. In the evenings, when her parents were busy with work, she would quietly go through each song until her hands memorized the movements. The soft sound of piano keys filled the house, replacing the silence that used to make it feel so still. Her younger brother sometimes sat nearby, listening. "You never get tired of that, do you?" he would ask. She'd smile and reply, "No, music doesn't tire me, it makes me feel alive." As weeks passed, she became more confident. She started helping the younger students who had joined the music club after seeing her performance. They looked up to her, calling her the piano girl. It made her laugh, but deep down she felt proud. She remembered how lost she had been when she started, how confusing the keys looked, and how harsh people's laughter sounded. Now she was the one guiding others, showing them that anyone could learn with patience. The teacher soon announced that the school would be hosting a small concert to celebrate the end of the term. This time, it wouldn't just be a talent show. It would be a formal event where students from different schools would be invited to perform. He wanted her to play a special piece to represent their school. The thought made her heart pound. That night, she could barely sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about what the teacher had said. Performing in front of her schoolmates was one thing, but this would be different. There would be strangers, other schools, teachers, and even local media. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she messed up in front of everyone? The next morning, she almost told her teacher she wasn't ready. But before she could say anything, he handed her a new sheet of music. This piece, he said, is not just about skill. It's about emotion. You have both. I believe in you. His words made her pause. For a moment, she saw the same trust in his eyes that she once wished others would see in her. She couldn't disappoint him, so she accepted the challenge. Every day after school, she practiced that piece until her fingers ached. It wasn't easy. The melody was complex, with changing rhythms and quick transitions. Many times she stopped in frustration, covering her face with her hands, whispering, "Why can't I get this right?" But then she remembered how far she'd come, and that was enough to make her keep going. As the concert day drew closer, her teacher arranged for her to practice in the school hall, where the acoustics were better. The first time she played there, the sound of her piano filled the space and echoed beautifully. She felt goosebumps as the notes bounced off the walls. It was as if the room itself was alive, breathing with the music. Students passing by often stopped to listen. Some clapped, some just stood quietly, moved by what they heard. She didn't notice them most of the time. She was too lost in the sound, too focused on making each note speak the way she wanted it to. Her parents were incredibly proud. Her mother started coming to school sometimes to watch her practice. She sat in the back row, silent but smiling, eyes full of pride. Her father even began saving up little by little, hoping to buy her a small keyboard one day so she could practice at home properly. The day of the concert arrived like a storm, sudden and full of emotion. The auditorium was bigger this time, with rows of chairs stretching far back. Students from other schools filled the seats, whispering excitedly. The stage lights were brighter, and the air was filled with nervous chatter. She sat backstage, hands clasped together, trying to steady her breathing. Her teacher came to check on her. "You've done this before," he said gently. "Just remember, it's not about perfection. It's about connection. Make them feel what you feel." When her name was announced, the audience clapped politely. She walked out, heart racing, the stage lights almost blinding her. She took a deep breath, sat down, and placed her fingers on the keys. For a few seconds, everything was quiet. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft and steady, like a whisper. The sound grew richer as the melody unfolded. Each note seemed to tell a story, of a girl who once sat alone in a room, who drew piano keys on paper, who was laughed at but never gave up. Her music carried that story to everyone listening. People in the audience leaned forward. Even those who didn't know much about music could feel the emotion in every sound. It was pure, honest, and full of life. Some teachers glanced at each other, impressed. Her own teacher stood backstage, arms crossed, but his eyes were glistening with pride. As she played the final section, the tempo increased. Her fingers moved quickly but gracefully, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm. The melody soared, then fell softly like a sigh. When the last note faded, the hall was silent for a heartbeat, and then came a wave of applause so loud it almost startled her. She looked up, stunned. People were standing, clapping, cheering. Some even whistled. For a moment, she just sat there, smiling through tears she didn't realize had fallen. After the show, people came to congratulate her. Students from other schools told her she had inspired them. A music instructor from the city approached and said, "You have something special. You should keep performing." Her teacher was glowing with pride. "You see," he said softly, "you didn't just play, you spoke without words." That evening, she went home feeling lighter than air. Her parents were waiting for her, smiling the moment she walked in. Her father said, "We saw you on the school's social page. Everyone's talking about your performance." Her mother hugged her tightly and whispered, "I told you one day the same music that made you cry would make others smile." That night, she sat by her window again, the same place where her journey began. She looked out at the sky, the stars twinkling faintly, and thought about everything that had happened. The laughter, the struggles, the long hours, the loneliness, it had all led her here. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had learned something important, that success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you can rise no matter how many times you fall. From that day, she started teaching herself new songs, not because anyone asked her to, but because she loved it. She began composing little tunes of her own, pieces that reflected her memories, her emotions, and her hope for the future. Her teacher encouraged her to write them down, saying, "Someday you'll thank yourself for saving your own voice in music." Months passed and her skills continued to grow. The school decided to send her to a regional music competition. When she heard the news, she was both excited and terrified. But this time she wasn't the same girl who doubted herself. She smiled and said, "I'll do it." On the night before the competition, she looked at her paper keyboard again, the one that had once been her only tool. She smoothed the creases and whispered, "Thank you for helping me start." Then she tucked it away carefully, knowing it would always remind her of where she came from. She didn't know if she would win the next competition. That wasn't what mattered anymore. What mattered was that she had turned something simple, a dream, a sound, a feeling, into something real. And as she drifted to sleep that night, the faint sound of piano notes played in her mind. The same notes that once stumbled and faltered now danced gracefully, just like her journey, beautiful, imperfect, and full of heart. The morning of the competition arrived with the sound of soft rain tapping against the windows. The town was quiet and the air felt fresh, almost peaceful. She woke early, not because someone told her to, but because her heart wouldn't let her rest. It was the day she had been waiting for. Another chance to step forward, to show what she had learned, and maybe to prove something not to others but to herself. Her teacher picked her up that morning holding a folder full of her sheet music. "You ready?" he asked, his voice calm. She nodded, though her heart was racing. In the car, they didn't talk much. The radio played softly in the background, but her mind was somewhere else, hearing the melody she would soon perform. When they arrived, the building looked much bigger than she had imagined. The regional music competition was being held in a local art center, and musicians from many schools were already there. Some tuned their instruments, some whispered nervously, and others sat quietly, eyes closed, focusing. For a moment she felt small again. She looked at the grand piano on stage and thought of how far away she was from being a professional. But then she reminded herself, this was never about being the best. It was about being brave enough to try. Her teacher gently placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Remember, no matter what happens today, you already did something special. You created music from your heart. That's what truly matters." His words made her smile. When it was her turn to perform, her hands trembled as she walked toward the stage. The lights above were bright and the hall was completely silent. She sat down slowly, adjusted the bench, and took a deep breath. Then her fingers touched the keys. The melody began softly, flowing like water over stones, gentle and pure. It carried with it the story of her journey, the laughter she endured, the lonely nights she spent practicing, the small victories that gave her strength. Every sound seemed to tell a piece of her life. The judges leaned in, listening closely. The audience, too, sat in complete silence, caught in the magic of her music. When she reached the final notes, her heart felt light. She pressed the last key, and the sound lingered, echoing gently across the hall before fading into quiet. Then came the applause, long and warm. She stood up, bowed deeply, and walked off the stage with a smile that couldn't be hidden. Backstage, her teacher hugged her tightly. "That was beautiful," he said. "You played with soul." Later that evening, when the results were announced, she didn't expect much. There were so many talented players, each with years of training and experience. But when her name was called for second place, she froze. For a moment, she couldn't believe it. Then she looked at her teacher, who was clapping proudly. Tears filled her eyes as she walked to the stage to receive the small trophy. It wasn't about the award. It was about the journey it represented. Every late night, every mistake, every doubt. She had turned them all into music. When she returned home that night, her parents were waiting by the door. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "We knew you'd make us proud." Her father smiled quietly, lifting the small trophy from her hands and setting it on the shelf. "This," he said, "isn't just a trophy. It's a reminder that hard work never goes to waste." The days after the competition were filled with joy. Her story spread quickly around the town. The local newspaper even wrote a small article about her journey, calling her the girl who turned silence into music. People who once mocked her now praised her determination. Younger children in the neighborhood began to look up to her, asking her to teach them how to play. One afternoon, she sat in the old school auditorium again, the same place where it all began. The piano stood quietly in the corner, the same one that once felt so intimidating. She walked up to it, ran her fingers gently across the keys and smiled. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" she whispered. The teacher approached from behind and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You know," he said, "the real magic isn't just in playing well. It's in sharing what you've learned with others. Would you like to help teach the new students next term?" Her eyes lit up. "Really?" she asked. He nodded. "They'll learn more from your story than from any lesson I can give." From that day, she began helping beginners, kids who could barely reach the keys, just like she once couldn't. She guided them with patience, telling them that it was okay to make mistakes. She often said, "Every wrong note teaches you something right." The children loved her. Her gentle encouragement made them believe in themselves. Months turned into years, and her passion for music only grew stronger. She continued to perform at local events, sometimes at small community centers, sometimes at charity shows. Each time her audience grew, and her confidence deepened. Eventually, her dedication caught the attention of a music foundation in the city. They offered her a scholarship to study at a professional music academy. When she received the letter, she couldn't hold back her tears. It felt unreal, like the universe was rewarding her for never giving up. Her parents were emotional too. Her mother said, "You see, dreams take time, but they always find their way if your heart stays true." When she moved to the city, everything felt new and exciting. The academy was filled with students from all over the country, each passionate and talented in their own way. At first, she felt out of place again, but this time she didn't let the feeling stop her. She reminded herself that she belonged there because she had earned it through effort, not luck. Her teachers at the academy were amazed by her dedication. One of them once told her, "You have something that can't be taught, the power to make people feel through your music." Her performances grew more mature, more emotional. She didn't just play notes anymore, she told stories through sound. Audiences could sense the truth in her playing, the way her music carried both pain and hope. A few years later, she returned to her hometown to visit her old school. Everything looked smaller now, but the memories were as big as ever. When she walked into the music room, a group of students were practicing there. They looked up in surprise, whispering her name. The teacher smiled warmly and said, "Look who's come home." She sat at the old piano once again, and the students gathered around. "Do you want to hear the first song I ever learned?" she asked with a grin. They nodded eagerly. Her fingers began to move, and the sound filled the room. It was the same simple tune she had practiced when everyone used to laugh at her. But now it sounded different, richer, deeper, alive with emotion. When she finished, the students clapped loudly, and one of them said, "I want to play like you one day." She smiled and said, "Then promise me something. Never stop trying, even when it feels impossible." Before leaving that day, she placed her old paper keyboard, the one she had drawn when she couldn't afford a real one, inside a glass frame and gifted it to the school. The teacher hung it on the wall above the piano. "This," she said softly, "is where it all began." Years later, she became known not only as a talented pianist but also as a teacher and mentor. She traveled to different schools, giving workshops and telling her story, how a girl once mocked for touching the piano had turned those laughs into applause. She often told young learners, "The world will always have people who doubt you. Don't waste time proving them wrong. Prove to yourself that you can be better than you were yesterday." Her story spread far beyond her town. Videos of her performances reached thousands of people online, and messages poured in from strangers saying her journey had inspired them to follow their own dreams. In music, art, and even in life. One quiet evening, after returning home from a long day, she sat at her piano again. The room was dimly lit, and the familiar scent of wood and polish filled the air. She closed her eyes, letting her fingers wander freely across the keys. The tune that came out wasn't written anywhere. It was pure emotion, a piece that came straight from her heart. As she played, she smiled, realizing that music had given her everything: confidence, peace, purpose, and a way to touch lives. The girl who was once laughed at had become the woman who inspired others, and though she had performed on many stages since then, She still believed the greatest stage was the one inside the heart, where dreams are born, nurtured and finally played out, note by note, until they become something beautiful.